Eli Vasquez had never been lucky in his life, and today was no different. The Galactic Archaeological Preservation Society had sent him to the deadest planet in the known universe, and they expected him to be grateful for the job. Vivaros was a world of rust-colored dirt and empty skies, and it orbited a star that was slowly dying like everything else in this forgotten corner of space. The temple complex spread across a massive plateau, and it was the only thing on the whole planet worth preserving. Eli stood at the entrance on his first day and wondered what terrible thing he had done in a past life to deserve this assignment. The temple was ancient beyond measure. The species that had built it called themselves the Kethver, and they had vanished from the galaxy 40,000 years before humans learned to make fire. Their god had died even before that. According to the archaeological reports, a dead god worshipped by a dead people on a dead world. Eli thought it was the perfect place for a man whose wife had left him and taken the dog and the apartment. And most of his self-respect, this job was simple enough. He had to keep dust from accumulating on the artifacts and maintain the atmospheric systems in the sealed chambers, and report anything unusual to the main office on Titan. The supply ship came once every 8 months, and between visits, he was completely alone for the first 6 months. Nothing unusual happened at all. Eli developed a routine that kept him sane. He would wake up in his small prefab habitat and eat the recycled protein that tasted like cardboard mixed with regret. Then he would walk the 17 kilometers of corridors that made up the temple's outer halls and run his cleaning drone ahead of him to catch the worst of the dust. He listened to old Earth music through his helmet speakers and tried not to think too much about the life he had left behind. The temple was strange in ways that made his head hurt if he looked too closely. The spires curved inward at the top instead of outward, like they were trying to grab something from the sky. The doorways were sized for beings 3 times his height, and walking through them made him feel like a child sneaking into a giant's castle. The walls were covered in writing that seemed to move and shift whenever he tried to read it directly. He learned to look at things from the corner of his eye. The inner sanctum was off limits according to his briefing documents. The environmental seals were unstable, and the atmospheric controls in that section had failed centuries ago. Eli was not supposed to go in there under any circumstances, but seals do not last forever, and on his 183rd day on the planet, Eli noticed that the door to the inner sanctum had finally given up. The metal had corroded through, and there was a gap just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Protocol said he should report the breach and wait for a specialist team to arrive. Protocol also said the next supply ship would not come for another 8 months. Eli looked at the darkness beyond the broken seal and felt something stir in his chest. It might have been curiosity or boredom, or the desperate need to do something other than walk the same corridors day after day. His cleaning drone hovered beside him, and its amber lights blinked in what might have been encouragement. Might as well see if it needs dusting, he said to no one in particular. The inner sanctum was smaller than he had expected. It was a single circular chamber with a dome ceiling painted in constellations that did not match any star charts Eli had ever seen. The air was stale but breathable, and his suit sensors did not detect anything dangerous in. The center of the room stood a plinth made of black stone that seemed to drink in the light from his helmet lampon. The plinth rested something the archaeological reports called the vessel. It was a crystalline structure roughly 2 meters tall and vaguely humanoid in shape. 40,000 years of grime and dust covered its surface so thickly that Eli could barely make out the shape beneath. He sighed and pulled out his microfiber cloth. This was what he did after all. He cleaned things. He started at the base and worked in slow, careful circles, the way his mother had taught him to clean the good silverware when he was a boy. Crystal beneath the filth was beautiful. It was deep blue shot through with veins of gold, and it was warm to the touch. Despite the cold of the chamber, Eli found himself taking his time and being gentle with the cloth. as if he was cleaning something precious instead of just another artifact. He was wiping down what might have been a shoulder when the light in the room changed. The golden veins in the crystal began to pulse slowly, at first like a heart remembering how to beat after a long rest, then faster and brighter, until the whole chamber was filled with warm golden light. Eli stumbled backward and dropped his cloth. The crystalline figure moved, its head turned toward him, and even though it had no face, just smooth planes of blue and gold, Eli felt himself being seen in a way that made his bones ache and his breath catch in his throat. And then it spoke not with sound. The words simply appeared in his mind, vast and ancient and heavy, with something that might have been relief or grief or joy, or all three at once. At last, Eli's legs gave out and he sat down hard on the dusty floor. His heart was pounding so loud he could hear it echoing in his helmet. The crystalline figure looked down at him, and the golden light pulsed in what might have been curiosity. "You are small," the voice in his mind said. It did not sound cruel or threatening. It sounded confused and maybe a little disappointed. "The Kethver were tall and proud, and they built me temples that touched the clouds, and they sent you to wake me." Eli's mouth was dry, and his hands were shaking, but somehow he managed to find his voice. "Nobody sent me," he said. "I am just the janitor." The golden veins pulsed slower, as if the being was thinking about this unexpected answer. "Janitor," it said. "One who cleans." "Yes, you came to this place, to this tomb of a forgotten god, to clean. It is my job." There was a long silence. The crystalline figure stood perfectly still, and the golden light moved through its form, like thoughts traveling through a vast and ancient mind. Then something changed in the voice. It became warmer somehow, almost gentle. "In 43,000 years, you are the first to come here, not seeking power or weapons or forbidden knowledge. And you are the first who did not want to bind me or destroy me or command me to do terrible things." The figure tilted its head and looked at the cloth. Eli had dropped on the floor. "You came because the temple was dirty and someone needed to clean it." Eli nodded because he could not think of anything else to say. The golden light pulsed bright for a moment. "I think," the ancient voice said, "that I would very much like to know more about your people, little janitor." Eli did what any sensible human would do when faced with an awakening alien god. He panicked. "I'm sorry," he babbled as he scrambled backward on the dusty floor. "I did not mean to wake you up, and I was just cleaning, and please do not turn me into ash because I have a pension I have not collected yet." The crystalline figure watched him with what might have been amusement. The crystalline figure watched him with what might have been amusement. The golden veins pulsed gently like a slow heartbeat. "You fear me," the voice in his mind said. "Yes," Eli admitted, because there was no point in lying to something that could speak directly into his thoughts. "You are a god, and I am a janitor, and that seems like a very uneven situation." "I suppose it does." The figure stepped down from its plinth, and Eli flinched, expecting to be crushed or vaporized or worse. But the being simply walked past him and stood at the entrance to the chamber, looking out at the ruined temple beyond. "What is your name, little janitor?" "Eli," he said. "Eli Vasquez." "I am Vethkaros," the being said. "I was a god once, though. I suspect that word means different things to different species." Eli slowly got to his feet and brushed the dust from his suit. His heart was still racing, but the immediate terror was fading into something more like intense curiosity. "What happened to you?" he asked. "The reports said you were dead." "I was dying," Vethkaros said. "There is a difference, though I understand why your scholars might have confused the two." The golden veins dimmed slightly as the being spoke. "The Kefir created me long ago, when their civilization was young and full of hope, and they poured their faith into this vessel until it became aware, and I woke for the first time 43,000 years before this moment. They made you in A sense, yes, but it is more accurate to say they gave me form and purpose through the force of their collective belief. Vethkaros turned to face Eli, and even without features, the crystalline face seemed sad. Ah, God is not born the way flesh creatures are born, and we do not eat or drink or breathe, and instead we feed on faith and belief and the psychic energy that conscious minds produce when they believe in something greater than themselves. So when the Kethver stopped believing in you, I began to starve, Vethkaros said. But they did not simply stop believing, and the truth is much worse than that. The being walked back into the chamber and stood before its plinth. Like a man looking at his own grave, the Kethver were conquerors. The voice said, they spread across the galaxy and crushed every species they encountered, and they wanted me to be their ultimate weapon. Eli felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. What did they want you to do? They wanted me to break other gods. The golden veins flickered with something that might have been old anger. In those days, many species had created beings like me, and these gods were repositories of faith and hope and meaning for their people, and the Kethver wanted me to consume that faith and destroy those gods and leave the galaxy worshipping only them. And you said no. I said no, Vethkaros confirmed. A god who exists only by destroying other faiths is no god at all, and such a being is merely a parasite wearing divinity as a mask, and I refused to become that thing. What happened then? They tried to force me, the being said. When that failed, they tried to starve me into submission by forbidding worship and tearing down my temples, and when that did not work, either they sealed me in this chamber and told their children I was a monster. Eli sat down on the edge of the plinth. His legs were tired, and his mind was struggling to process everything he was hearing. 43,000 years, he said. You have been alone in here for 43,000 years. Yes. How did you survive without faith to sustain you? Vethkaros was silent for a moment. I held on to a single belief, the voice said finally. I believed that someday someone would come who was different from the Kethver, and I believed that the universe was not so cruel as to let me fade away in the dark without ever knowing kindness again. The golden veins pulsed brighter. And then you came, Eli Vasquez, and you are not tall or powerful or important by the standards of the galaxy, but you came to a dead world to clean a dead temple because it was your job and because things deserve care. Eli felt his face grow warm. I am really not anything special, he said. I am just a maintenance technician who could not hold on to his wife or his apartment or his dog. You misunderstand, Vethkaros said. The Kethver were special by every measure the galaxy uses, and they were brilliant and powerful, and they built an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds, and they were also cruel and selfish, and they destroyed themselves through their own ambition. The being knelt down so that its featureless face was level with Eli's. You are small and ordinary, and unremarkable by those same measures, but you came here alone and cleaned this temple, not because anyone was watching or because you would be rewarded, but because you believed it mattered, and that is a different kind of special entirely. Eli did not know what to say to that. Your people, Vethkaros continued. They are strange in ways. I am only beginning to understand, and I have watched your dreams drift through the void for centuries as I slept, and you believe in everything all at once. What do you mean? You believe in science and magic and logic and faith, and you build gods and tear them down and build them again. And you do it not because you need to, but because you want to, and your belief is not a transaction like it was for the Kethver, but something else entirely. The golden light grew warmer. You believe in things simply for the joy of believing, and that kind of faith is an endless fire that never burns out, and it was enough to wake me from a sleep that should have lasted forever. Eli looked at his hands and thought about everything the being had said. So what happens now? He asked. Vethkaros stood and walked to the broken seal that led out of the chamber. I have been alone for 43,000 years, the voice said. I have been silent and forgotten, and I have dreamed of a galaxy I no longer recognize. The being turned back to look at Eli. I would very much like to see what has changed, and I would very much like to meet more of your strange and impossible species. Eli thought about his boring routine and his empty habitat, and the 8 months until the next supply ship. I suppose I could use the company, he said. Somewhere deep in the crystalline form, the golden veins pulsed with something that felt very much like hope. Over the following weeks, Eli became something he had never expected to be. He became a teacher. It was ridiculous when he thought about I was a maintenance technician with 2 years of community college and a certificate in atmospheric systems. Repair. His greatest achievement before this assignment had been fixing the plumbing on Ganymede Station without causing a sewage flood, and now he was explaining human history to an ancient alien deity who had existed before his species learned to walk upright. Vetharos was endlessly curious. The being absorbed information like a sponge soaking up water, and the questions came faster than Eli could answer them. But the questions were never what Eli expected. Tell me about your wars, Vetharos said one evening as they sat in Eli's small habitat. The crystalline form flickered in the artificial light, and the golden veins pulsed with interest. Which ones? Eli asked. We've had a lot of them. All of them, and start from the beginning. So, Eli talked about the ancient empires and the medieval conflicts and the world wars that had nearly destroyed human civilization. He talked about the nuclear bombs that could have ended everything, and the Cold War that had kept the world balanced on the edge of annihilation for decades. Vetharos listened without interrupting until Eli finally ran out of words. Your people built weapons that could destroy your own world, the being said. Yes, and then you chose not to use them. Mostly yes. The golden veins pulsed in what Eli had learned to recognize as deep thought. The Kethver built similar weapons, Vetharos said. They used them without hesitation, and that is why their world is dead and why their empire is dust. We came close, Eli admitted. There were moments when it could have gone either way, but it did not. No. Your species looked into the face of total destruction and chose to step back. Eli shrugged. We are stubborn, I guess, and we like to think we can fix things even when the situation looks hopeless. Vetharos made a sound in Eli's mind that was almost like laughter. Stubborn, the being repeated. Yes, that is a good word for your people. The conversations continued day after day. Eli explained democracy and capitalism and socialism and all the other systems humans had invented to organize themselves. Explained religion and science and the long struggle between faith and reason that had shaped human civilization. He explained art and music and literature and the strange human need to create beautiful things even when survival was not guaranteed. And always Vetharos asked the questions that Eli did not expect. You went to your moon, the being said one day. Yes, not for resources. No, not for military advantage. No, we just wanted to see if we could do it. The golden veins flared bright. You crossed the void between worlds and walked on another celestial body for no practical reason at all. The guy who led the mission said, we did it because it was there, Eli said. I guess that sounds silly when I say it out loud. It does not sound silly, Vetharos said. It sounds impossible and wonderful and completely unlike anything the Kethver would have understood. The being rose and walked to the window of the habitat. The dying star that lit this world cast long shadows across the rust-colored landscape. Tell me about your network, Vetharos said. The one that connects all your minds together. You mean the internet? Yes, Eli thought about how to explain it. It is a system that lets humans share information instantly across any distance, and we use it for communication and commerce and education and entertainment and pictures of small animals. Eli blinked. How do you know about that? I have been watching your dreams for centuries, Vetharos reminded him. Your species dreams about cats with unusual frequency. We really like cats, Eli admitted. So I have observed. The being turned back to face him. You built a technology that could have been the greatest tool for control and manipulation in the history of your species. And you used it to share images of domestic animals and argue about trivial matters and create communities based on the most obscure shared interests. Is that bad? It is human, Vethkaro said, which is to say it is unpredictable and irrational and completely fascinating. The golden light warmed. Beketh, Ver, would have used such a network to enforce conformity and crush dissent and monitor every thought of every citizen, and instead your people made it into a chaotic wilderness of competing ideas and terrible jokes and heartfelt connections between strangers who will never meet in person. Eli had never thought about it that way, I suppose. We are kind of messy, he said. You are alive, Vethkaros corrected. The Kethver were orderly and efficient, and their civilization was a perfect machine, and it crushed everything that made existence worthwhile in the name of progress. The being sat down across from Eli, and the crystalline form seemed somehow smaller and more intimate. Your people make mistakes constantly, and you argue and fight and hurt each other, and you also forgive and create, and love and hope, and you choose to be better even when it would be easier to give up. Is that why you want to meet more of us? That is part of it, Vethkaros admitted. But there's something else as well. What? Your faith is different from anything I have ever known. The golden veins pulsed gently. The Kethver believed in me because I gave them power, and their faith was a transaction, and when I refused to give them what they wanted, their belief turned to hatred. But humans believe in things for no reason except that. Believing feels good, and you have faith in each other and in the future, and in the idea that existence has meaning, even when the universe offers no evidence to support that belief. Vethkaros leaned forward. That kind of faith does not feed a god. The way the Kethvers worship fed me, and it does something better, and it makes a god want to be worthy of it. Eli felt his throat tighten. I have not done anything special, he said again. I just cleaned your temple because it was dirty. Exactly. Vethkaros said. You did not clean it to gain favor with a god or to earn a reward in some afterlife, and you cleaned it because you believed it deserved to be clean, and that small, stubborn act of care is the most powerful form of faith I have ever encountered. The being rose again. The supply ship will arrive in a few months, yes. Yes, I would like to leave with you when it comes, Vethkaros said. I would like to see what your species has built among the stars, and I would like to understand how such strange, impossible creatures came to exist in a universe that should have destroyed them long ago. Eli thought about the cramped quarters on the supply ship and the confused reports he would have to file and the chaos that would follow. When he tried to explain that he was bringing a 43,000-year-old god home with him, that is going to be hard to explain to my supervisors, he said. I imagine it will be, Vethkaros agreed, and somewhere in the crystalline form the golden light pulsed with what could only be anticipation. The supply ship arrived 3 months later, and Captain Chan took one look at the crystalline figure standing beside Eli on the landing pad and said words that cannot be repeated in polite company. Vasquez, she said when she had recovered her composure. What in the name of everything holy is that? Captain, this is Vethkaros, Eli said. He is a god, or at least he used to be, and Vethkaros, this is Captain Chen, who's basically a god herself out here since merchant captains control life and death in the outer territories. A pleasure to meet you, Vethkaros said. His voice appeared directly in the captain's mind, and she flinched so hard she nearly fell over. It talks in your head, she said. Yes, and you want me to bring it back to civilization. Him, Eli corrected. And yes, I do. Captain Chun's hand had not left her weapon since she stepped off the ship. She looked at Vethkaros with the suspicious eyes of someone who had survived 30 years in deep space by never trusting anything she did. "Not understand, explain," she said. "Start from the beginning and do not leave anything out." So Eli explained it took 2 hours and 4 cups of the terrible coffee that the ship's synthesizer produced. By the end of it, Captain Chun had stopped reaching for her gun, and the administrators back on Titan were arguing loudly over the communication link about whether first contact protocols applied to resurrected deities. "They want to quarantine him," Chun said after she finally cut the connection. "They want to study him and make sure he is not dangerous before they let him anywhere near human population centers. I understand their caution," Vethkaros said. "A being of my nature appearing suddenly would concern any rational species, and I would be worried if they simply accepted my presence without question." "He has been nothing but helpful," Eli protested. "Last week he helped me fix the atmospheric recycler, and it turns out divine. Insight is really good for debugging technical problems. The principles are similar," Vethkaros agreed. "Faith and engineering both require understanding what a system needs to function and then providing it." Captain Chun rubbed her eyes and looked very much like a woman who wanted to retire. "This is above my pay grade," she said. "Way above." She looked at the crystalline figure for a long moment. "You really want to come with us?" she asked. "You could stay here, and no one would bother you. I've been alone for 43,000 years, Vethkaros said. "I find that I've developed a taste for company, and besides, your janitor tells me there are cats on your space stations, and I wish to understand why these creatures have inspired such devotion." The journey back to Titan took 6 weeks. In that time, Vethkaros became something that Eli had not anticipated. He became popular. The ship carried a crew of 23 people. Every single one of them eventually found their way to the cargo hold, where Vethkaros had taken up residence. They came with questions at first. They wanted to know about the nature of the universe and what happened after death, and whether existence had any meaning. Vethkaros answered what he could, but mostly he listened. He listened to the chief engineer talk about her divorce and how she still dreamed about her ex-husband, even though he had been cruel to her. He listened to the navigator describe his fear that his children were growing up without him, and that they would not know him when he finally returned home. He listened to the cook explain in exhausting detail the proper technique for making dumplings and why the ship's synthesizer could never get the texture quite right, and with each conversation the golden veins in the crystalline form seemed to glow a little brighter. "This is what I was made for," Vethkaros told Eli one night when the ship was quiet. "Not to grant wishes or demand sacrifices, but simply to hear and to witness. I do not understand. The Kethver wanted me to be a weapon," the being said. "They wanted me to reward their faithful and punish their enemies, and they never understood that a god's true purpose is much simpler." "What is a god's true purpose?" "To tell a species that they matter," Vethkaros said. "To look at a creature struggling through existence and say, 'I see you, and your pain is real, and your joy is real, and you are not alone in the vastness of the universe.'" When they reached Titan Station, there was a crowd waiting. Word had spread faster than the ship could travel. A dead god had awakened, and a human janitor had woken him, and the first new deity in recorded galactic history had chosen humanity as his people. Representatives from a dozen species demanded to know if Vethkaros was a threat to their faiths. The scientific community wanted to understand how a being of pure psychic energy could exist at all. The Galactic Council wanted assurances that humanity was not trying to gain an unfair advantage by acquiring a god. Vethkaros stood before them all in the great hall of Titan Station, and his crystalline form caught the light of the distant sun. And he spoke. "I have been asked what I am," he said, and his voice appeared in every mind present. "I am a god, but I am not your god, and I am not here to be worshipped or feared or obeyed." The crowd murmured nervously. "I I'm here because for the first time in 43,000 years, someone offered me kindness without asking for anything in return. He looked at Eli, who was standing awkward and uncomfortable in the back of the hall. Your species is young and strange and gloriously impossible, Bethkaros continued. You believe in things for no reason except the joy of believing, and you look at the void between stars and see not emptiness but possibility, and you are by every measure the galaxy uses to judge a species, completely irrational and contradictory and absurd. The golden veins blaze bright enough to hurt, and that is exactly why you will outlast. You saw. The hall was silent. The Kefir were perfect, Bethkaros said. They were logical and efficient, and they built an empire that should have lasted forever, and they destroyed themselves because they could not imagine being wrong. Humanity is a mess, he continued. You fight among yourselves and make terrible mistakes and repeat the same errors, generation after generation, and you also learn and grow and change and hope, and you choose to be better even when the universe gives you no reason to believe that being better matters. He turned to address the alien representatives directly. I do not ask you to worship me or even to believe in me, he said. I ask only that you watch these strange creatures and learn from them because they have discovered something that the oldest civilizations in the galaxy never understood. What is that? Someone called out. That the measure of a species is not power or knowledge or longevity. Bethkaros said, it is the stubborn refusal to stop caring about things even when caring is painful and unrewarded. And that small act of faith is the closest thing to divinity that exists in this cold universe. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then, somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. It spread slowly at first, and then faster until the whole hall was filled with applause, and standing alone in the middle of that sound, Bethkaros turned to look at Eli, and the golden light pulsed with something that felt very much like gratitude. 50 years had passed since Eli Vasquez cleaned the dust from a dead god and changed the galaxy forever. He sat now in a garden on Mars and watched his grandchildren chase each other through the red dust. His joints ached the way old joints do, and his memories sometimes slipped away before he could catch them, but some things he remembered perfectly. Remembered the weight of the microfiber cloth in his hand. Remembered the way the golden light had first pulsed in that dark chamber. He remembered the voice that had appeared in his mind after 43,000 years of silence, saying those two simple words at last. You are thinking loudly, Bethkaros said. God sat beside him on the garden bench, and his crystalline form had changed over the decades. There were new colors woven through the blue and gold mouth, reds of silver and green that he had picked up from humanity's collective dreams. He looked softer somehow, more human. Just remembering, Eli said. The temple and the ship and all of it. Eli watched his granddaughter tumble into a flower bed and come up laughing with dirt on her face. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Waking up, I mean, and coming with us. Never, Bethkaros said, and his voice was warm in Eli's mind in a way it had not been when they first met. The Kefir gave me existence, but your people gave me purpose. What do you do these days anyway? Eli asked. I hear stories, but I never know what is true. I listen, the god said, in hospitals, and hospices, and in schools and shelters, and on ships between the stars. I go wherever someone needs to be heard. That is all. That is everything, Bethkaros said. I do not grant miracles or promise salvation, and I do not answer prayers with rewards or punishments, and I simply listen, and I tell people that I see them and that they matter. Eli nodded slowly. That is what you were always supposed to do, is it not? He said, before the Kefir tried to turn you into a weapon. Perhaps the god admitted. Or perhaps I'm only now becoming what I was always meant to be. Bethkaros turned his featureless face toward the children playing in the garden. They do not know who I am, he said. Your grandchildren, I mean, and to them I am just another strange alien who visits their grandfather. Do you want them to know? No, Vethkaro said. I want to be exactly what I am to them, which is a friend of their family and nothing more. And divinity is not about being worshipped, after all. What is it about then? Being present, the god said. Simply being there when someone needs you to be there. The Martian sun was setting, and the sky was turning colors that had no names in any human language. The small one tried to put a hat on me last week. Vethkaros mentioned Eli, laughed so hard his ribs hurt. She does that, he said. She gets it from her mother. They sat in comfortable silence for a while and watched the light fade over the red landscape. I have been thinking, Eli said finally. About what? About everything that has happened since that day in the temple, and about all the things that have changed in the galaxy, and things had changed in the 50 years since Vethkaros revealed himself to the universe. Humanity had spread further across the stars than anyone had predicted. Other species had started to look at them differently, not with fear or contempt, or even respect exactly, but with something like curiosity. What was it about these strange, short-lived creatures that had attracted the attention of a god? What did they have that older and wiser civilizations lacked? Answer was always the same. They cared about things. They cared about things even when caring was irrational and unrewarded and painful. They believed in things simply because believing felt right, and that stubborn, impossible faith had changed everything. You taught us something, Eli said. Something we did not know we needed to learn. What is that? That being small does not mean being unimportant, Eli said. That the universe is not as cold as it looks, and that kindness matters even when no one is watching. You taught me the same thing, Vethkaro said. The Kethver believed that gods were meant to be served and worshipped and feared, and you showed me that the opposite is true. What do you mean? Gods exist to serve, Vethkaro said. We exist to witness and to listen and to tell the creatures who created us that their small lives have meaning, and that is all, and that is enough. Eli's granddaughter came running up to them with a flower clutched in her dirty hand. Grandpa, she said, look what I found. That is beautiful, sweetheart. She turned to the crystalline figure beside her grandfather. Do you want to see it too, Mr. Crystal? I would like that very much, Vethkaros said. The little girl held up the flower and began to explain everything she knew about it in the breathless way that children explain things. They have just discovered. She talked about the color and the shape and the way it smelled and the bug she had seen crawling on one of the petals, and the ancient god listened with complete attention as Kovoda to bug. If every word was the most important thing he had ever heard, because to him it was every word spoken by every creature in the universe was sacred. Every small moment of connection between beings was a kind of prayer. Every act of caring was an act of faith. That was what humanity had taught him. That was what a janitor with a microfiber cloth had shown a god who had forgotten what belief was supposed to be. Flower was just a flower. The child was just a child. The old man on the bench was just a man who had lived a good life and was now watching it come to an end. Somehow, all of it was holy. Thank you for showing me, Vethkaro said when the little girl finished her explanation. You are welcome, she said, and then she ran off to find something else to discover. Eli watched her go with tears in his eyes. That is it, is it not? He said. That is the whole point of everything. Yes, Vethkaro said. The smallest acts of kindness are the closest thing to immortality that the universe has ever known. The sun finished setting and the stars came out over Mars. Somewhere out there among those points of light, humanity was building and exploring and making mistakes and learning and hoping and believing in things for no reason except that believing felt right. And beside them, always listening, always present, was a god who had learned the true meaning of divinity from a janitor who just wanted to clean a dusty temple. "Thank you, Ela," Vethkaro said. "For what?" "For waking me up," the god said. "For showing me that the universe still had kindness in it, and for teaching me that the measure of a life is not how long it lasts, but how much it cares." Eli smiled and leaned back on the bench and looked up at the stars. "You are welcome," he said. "It was my job, after all." And the golden light pulsed one more time in the darkness, warm and grateful and full of something that might have been love or hope or simply the quiet joy of being present in a universe where small stubborn creatures refused to stop believing that things deserved care. That was enough. That was always enough. That was everything.